Actually ended up here in Connecticut with my wife, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps May 19th, 1999. I had actually been in school for 2 years. I was attending Miami University of Ohio and wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, so I wanted to explore other options and decided that I wanted to join the Marine Corps to give back to this country. You know, we have so many wonderful things here. It sounds cliche, a lot of people say it all the time, but that's why I felt compelled to join the Marine Corps.
What can you remember, if you're thinking back to after you enlisted, what was the experience like of enlisting and then going through all the steps that led up to going to basic training?
Okay. Boot camp was a few years ago. It was 10 years ago, but it's still, a lot of things are still fresh in my mind. I can remember getting off the bus and standing on the yellow footprints that everybody hears about. That's very famous at Parris Island.
Which camp were you?
I was at Parris Island.
Okay.
So I arrived at Parris Island. I think we arrived probably like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then the first thing we did, we went and got our head shaved, and then about 07 we met the drill instructors, and then it was game on, non-stop for 13 weeks. It was very intense 13 weeks, and I'm trying to think of some things that really stuck out in my mind.
Well, I'm sure the forced marches were.
Yeah, the forced marches, I would actually probably say that was probably one of my least favorite things. And you only do a few while you're in Parris Island. Actually, once I got out and I was in infantry school, the marches were a lot longer and a lot harder. What else do you want to know about boot camp?
Any unusual experiences while you were there? Did you make any friendships while you were there that have lasted through to now? Anything that you thought was out of the ordinary or that you didn't expect when you were going into the military?
I do have a lot of friends still left from boot camp. The Marine Corps is actually really small. And at the time when I enlisted, I was in Ohio, and I first got assigned to an MP company in Dayton, Ohio. Just because I enlisted to be in the infantry, but they didn't have any infantry reserve units in the area. Closest one was Columbus, and so since Dayton, Ohio was closer to where I lived, they assigned me there. And 3 guys that I was in boot camp with ended up being in Charlie Company here in Connecticut when I moved to Connecticut 2 years after I had joined the Marine Corps. Yeah, it was really small, and you know, we're still good friends. I still keep in contact with them. Some of the guys that were in the fleet, throughout my various activations, I've run into them on and off, and I still see them a lot.
Now, going forward from boot camp, you said your first assignment was up in Ohio. What would you consider to be your first major assignment or significant assignment? Probably, I'm guessing, outside of the United States.
First time I got deployed was with the MP company. We got sent to Cerosky, Honduras. We were MP detachment there. We were tasked out with providing base security. It was a Joint Task Force Bravo mission with the Honduran Air Force, who was running the base, and then with the Air Force and then the Marine Corps. And actually, the interesting thing, it was Ollie North's old compound during the Iran-Contra time. So I got to see his old compound where a lot of the meetings went on. And that was my first deployment outside the United States.
Do they still talk about him down there?
Yeah, a little bit, not too much. But that was a good time. It was actually a lot of fun.
Now, from Honduras, you were deployed to the Middle East then, or were you bounced a few other places?
I went to, let's see, 2000, I moved to Connecticut with my wife because she got into grad school. She was actually attending Miami University. So I moved here, and in the reserves, if you want to move, you can move. They'll just transfer you to a different unit. So I got transferred to Charlie Company 125, which is an infantry unit. And then in 2003 is the first time our unit got activated. And we got sent and tasked out with doing CTF 53 mission, which was guarding the MPS ships, taking supplies into Kuwait, into Iraq. It wasn't a very exciting mission, but we got to see a lot of the world. We were getting on ship in Crete and then taking them down through the Suez Canal and through the Indian Ocean up into the Persian Gulf. And they were offloading or loading equipment in Kuwait. We had some guys that were on small boats going up the Tigris and Euphrates River.
Now, I know you noted that by the time you completed your full-time service, you were a sergeant. Were you still a private at that stage, or had you already started advancing through the ranks?
My first deployment, I was still a Lance Corporal. By the time we deployed to Iraq, I was a sergeant, squad leader, and actually now I'm a staff sergeant.
Right. So, talk a little bit about once you were over in the Middle East, once you were in Iraq, how you progressed to the point where you were actually engaged in the different locations that you saw. I don't want to say you saw combat, but certainly you saw action.
Okay, we, Charlie Company, and actually 1st Battalion, 25th Marines, we were attached to Regimental Combat Team 5, and for short RCT 5, and we got tasked with area operations in the city of Fallujah. They divided up the battalion. Well, we had 3 companies in that AO, well, plus our weapons company. And Charlie Company, we got tasked with the CMOC. Bravo Company was to the north. They were at the train station. Alpha Company was out west, just outside the city. And then Weapons Company, they made them a mobile assault platoon. And they were at Bahria, which is, I think, Uday's old palace outside the city of Fallujah. And after the fall of Fallujah, actually right before that, in 2003, they took that place over before the push in 04.
People who may not know, that's Uday Hussein.
Yes, Uday Hussein.
That's his son, Saddam's son.
That's where our headquarters was for the battalion, and that's where weapons was, mobile assault platoon. And so that was our area operation that we shared with Iraqi Army and Iraqi police, and for the full 7-month deployment, we were in that same location. Marine Corps does 7-month rotations in country, and so for the 7 months, we were right there in that location. So I got to know the city very well.
Now, were you tasked with, was it a policing function, or was it more of trying to locate insurgent locations, or both? Or?
It was both. We are an infantry unit, and so at that time in 2006, the main focus was, this was pre-troop surge, was rooting out insurgents, and then also training Iraqi security forces, and then, as everybody's heard, winning the hearts and minds. So we were doing multiple things. Some of our missions required that we go out and conduct raids, looking for insurgent safe houses, looking for weapons. Some of our missions were civil engagement missions, where we were going out and giving out toys, candy, different things that the people in the city of Fallujah needed. Some of our missions were, let's go out and do some meet and greets. Let's see what the atmosphere in the city is like, you know, what businesses don't have electricity, what people need. That way there's a face. You know, we're not just rolling around in Humvees. You know, we really were trying to win the hearts and minds and build a good relationship with the city and the people. We usually didn't go out looking for a fight, but the fight came to us a lot of the times, and that's how it happens. And unfortunately, I would probably say 90% of our engagements, you know, we're in the souk, we're in the crowded area. That's where we were targeted because, you know, it's helpful to the insurgents to have collateral damage,
Right.
but that was never our intentions.
So, since we don't normally get to hear that, your perspective, the perspective of somebody who's on the ground, what would you say the overall reaction was amongst the Iraqi people in the different locations, specifically now since we're talking about Fallujah?
Well, I was actually really surprised when I got there, because prior to that, you know, I had no firsthand knowledge of what it was like to actually be in Iraq among the people. Our base was literally in the middle of the city, so we were with the people 24/7, every single day. And what I found was basically there were 3 different types of reactions to our presence there. You obviously had the people that were trying to kill you, who were allied with foreign fighters in Al-Qaeda in Iraq. You had people that didn't necessarily want us there. Obviously, it's their country. A lot of their normal day-to-day lives have been disrupted by the war, but nonetheless realized that if we weren't there, there would be total chaos and the death and destruction would be intensified 10 times. And then you had the people that said they were legitimately grateful that we overthrew Saddam and his sons. I heard stories from people when Uday would come through the city of Fallujah, either going to Baghdad or going to Ramadi. As he would go by, he would pick out women, and he would just, take those women, rape them, oftentimes kill them. Actually, after the push, when they drained the lake or Palisades, there's a lot of dead bodies of women in that lake. And so those were the three general responses that we got. And who we were targeting were the people that were on the fence, who didn't necessarily want us there, but could be sympathetic to our cause, and sometimes are sympathetic to the insurgents' cause. And what I saw the biggest problem is the foreign fighters that were coming in, Al-Qaeda in Iraq that was allying with the Sunni insurgency. They were strong-arming the people and coercing them into helping their cause, because we're ruled by the law of war. They are not. I saw them do horrible, brutal things to their own people, maim and kill women and children, torture them. That got the most frustrating when, day after day after day after day, we kept getting IED attacks in the same spot, the same location. And we know all the people around that worked in the shops or lived in the homes around there, knew who was putting the IEDs there, knew where they were coming from, but they were too afraid to help us. And what I heard most is, well, we don't know how long you guys are going to stay here, but they're still going to be here when you're gone. So why should I risk my life and my family's life to help you if you guys aren't going to stay and help us? So that was very frustrating, that we didn't have that ability. Not that we wanted the ability that the insurgents did, but because of the rules of engagement were so strict, we were really kind of fighting with one arm tied behind our back. And we couldn't do what we needed to do to stop the insurgents in order to provide the stability and the security to make the people feel safe, so they would start giving us information that we could start capturing these guys, stop the flow of weapons, stop the flow of money coming into the city.
Were you stationed in Iraq when I don't know the right term to use, the public opinion turnaround started to take place with the Iraqi people, where they started to be more open to our presence and less open to the presence of the insurgents? Oh yeah, the Sunni awakening actually started by a head sheikh in Fallujah, because Fallujah was like the center for the insurgency. Zarqawi had set up his base of operations there. He was actually killed in Iraq during the time that I was there. And what had happened that started the Sunni awakening and started the civilian population turning on, in particular Al-Qaeda in Iraq, was a high-ranking Iraqi police officer had been assassinated. I think maybe end of July, August time frame. And that really upset a lot of the people. And so that's when they started turning. The Sunni insurgency, which is made up of all kinds of different groups, they turned on Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they started giving us a lot of information. We started acting on a lot of that information, then we just ran out of time, and we turned it over to the units that were following us. And so it started in Fallujah, and then spread out into the rest of the Anbar province. Now, you said you were at different points you were tasked with training Iraqi forces. I know we all call them police, but in fact some of them are like a military unit. How was that received, and how did that go for the Marines and the Army on the ground that was doing that?
Well, you have the Iraqi police,
right,
and then you have the Iraqi Army, both operating there. There was good things and bad things about it. The Iraqi police was more problematic and harder to work with and train than the Iraqi army, because the Iraqi police, they recruit within the city. And so you have people that spent their entire lives growing up in the city, and then, you know, I decide to become an insurgent and you decide to become an Iraqi police officer, but you don't necessarily, you're doing it because you want to make some money for your family, which is a lot of reason why people join the insurgency. So a lot of times the Iraqi police would turn their eyes to what was going on, who was planning the IEDs, because they were neighbors, they were friends, or they were getting paid off not to do anything about it, or the Iraqi police was infiltrated a lot by the insurgents. You know, we caught Iraqi police trucks going around planting IEDs, and so that was a major problem. And then another problem was they were targeted a lot, and there were times that they were having recruiting drives in the city, and
those are the things that we heard about back home, was when there were attacks on training centers.
it happened. I forget how many recruiting drives we had, but almost every single one, you know, a suicide bomber came and blew himself up and killed a lot of people. And so I never really trusted the Iraqi police, and they were kind of a problem to work with. And another thing that I saw when I really started distrusting them, we had just done our RIP with 2-6, was the unit that we replaced, and I was posting my Marines to do fob security, and I was posting them, and we started receiving fire from the mosque across the street. And so we take cover, we return fire, quick firefight, it was over, and of course we're not allowed to enter a mosque. So, you know, we call it into hire. They have to coordinate with the Iraqi police to cordon off the mosque, to go in and search it and find the people that are inside. Well, the post that I was at, I could see down the alleyway in between the apartment building that was across the street and the mosque. I watched Iraqi police go in. Then I watched them just letting every single man that was in that mosque go right out into the street and didn't detain a single person. There was no way that they got out, because we could see all the avenues of approach into the building. So the very people that were firing at us, they just simply let go, which happened consistently all the time. It was very frustrating. It was very frustrating to try to do zone clearings with them, because when we had to share the information with them, they would already tell who was there, and so by the time we got there to try to find weapons or try to find the people, they were already gone. The Iraqi army was a different story. They recruit outside of Fallujah and outside the Anbar province. The Iraqi army that was there in Fallujah, I think they were from Basra and Baghdad, and they were a lot easier to work with. My unit wasn't directly involved in training them. We had guys detached from the battalion that were in charge of training them, but we did a lot of joint operations with them. Zone clearing missions, we would go and do observation posts with them. We'd go to their FOB and spend time with them and try to work.
You use that term, what is that?
Oh, forward operating base?
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
And so we do a lot of joint operations with them, and I mean, they did an excellent job. I mean, they were right there fighting alongside of us. You know, a lot of times they were bearing the worst of the fighting. I mean, they were attacked consistently, nonstop, even more than we were. And, you know, when they had to fight, they fought, and they fought right alongside of us. You know, there were some, you know, the cultural differences were kind of hard to work with, because they would get to the point where I'm done for the day, and they were done, and we ended up usually having to finish up their job. But they weren't afraid to fight, and for the most part, they were proficient at what they were doing.
Now, in terms of relations, just day-to-day relations with the locals, we can use that location as an example. How were you received, not just your unit, but how were you received personally with people when you're talking to them on the street? I'm guessing I believe you have learned a lot of Arabic, both from being there and since, but did you communicate directly with people? Did you have somebody who served as an interpreter for you, or was it a combination of both?
We had interpreters who were Iraqi civilians. really, really good interpreters. One, Sammy, who is actually now a U.S. citizen. He was in the city of Fallujah for 4 years during Al-Fajr, which was the push on Fallujah in '04, and up through when we were there, and I think about 2 years ago, he came to the United States and got his citizenship. And then they obviously teach you survival language in the Marine Corps, so we learned, which actually sparked my interest, and obviously being in Iraq sparked my interest to learn Arabic, and I picked up a lot more while I was there. So I would try to communicate with the people, and I did some, and then we met a lot of people that actually spoke English. Probably far more than we actually knew, because I'm sure a lot of them pretended they didn't. But depending on what area of the city we were in, we were more welcome than others. The whole entire city is divided up into different tribes of people. And so some tribes were more friendly than others. The area of the Jolan Park, that was up in the northwest side of the city, that area was not very friendly. We weren't very welcomed in that area. But for the most part, the Iraqi people are warm, very friendly people, very giving people, very kind, generous. A lot of times, we'd be out on a 6-hour patrol or an entire, zone clearing for the day, having to go in and search people's houses. They would give us food, they would give us water, they would let us sit in their one air-conditioned room. So we had a lot of really, really good experiences with the people. And, a lot of us had like toys sent over, and so we'd always carry toys with us to give out to the kids. And, we made friends with a lot of people. There's a lot of people that every time, we'd go by, they would say hi to us, offer us food. There was one older lady who lived along one of the MSRs, and she was one of the few people that helped us. When there was an IED on the road, she would hang out a white sheet, and we knew that there was an IED on that road. So overall, most of the population was very friendly, very kind, and I had a good experience with them. It was that small percentage of, the insurgents and the foreign fighters that were causing a lot of the problems. And you had to be sympathetic to the people, because, a lot of them were just victims of circumstance.
Right.
They didn't necessarily, feel any overwhelming sense of duty to help the insurgents, more than they did us. But if they didn't help us, we weren't going to kill them. If they didn't help the insurgents, they were going to kill them, or they were going to kill one of their kids, or they were going to kill the husband, or they were going to kill the wife. So you had to be sympathetic to their situation they were in. It got really frustrating, but certainly I could understand it. And you could understand why a lot of the people were joining the insurgency. They have 2 wives and 10 kids, and there's no more jobs right now because of the disruption of the war. And now you got this guy, so here's $300, go put this IED on the side of the road. So it was more, when I was there, I wasn't fighting, because the freedom of our country, all that's always there. But, I felt genuinely, I really, really genuinely wanted to help the people of Iraq. I really, really, really felt sympathetic to their situation. It was a bad situation to be in. And obviously for the guy to my left and the guy to my right, that's why we did what we did and why we were there. But I don't think you would be a human being if you didn't feel like you wanted to help these people that were, especially being, brutally tortured and mutilated by their own people.
But that was going to lead to 2 questions. I'll ask the second question I was going to ask first, since you just mentioned it. Given, for the lack of a better term, a lot of the horrors that you guys were exposed to, how did you learn to process that? I know people talk about becoming desensitized and everything, but how did you learn to view that on a daily basis and be able to process it so that you could keep doing what you were doing?
I think you have to shut off some of your emotions. After seeing kids being killed and people being hurt and maimed, and your friends being wounded and your friends being killed, you have to shut your emotions off at that time. It absolutely affects you, but at that time you can't let it affect you because you still have a job to do. You still have other people to take care of. And if you let that affect you, you're not going to be able to do that. So I don't know how else to describe it, but I mean, you have to shut those emotions off and ignore it. You make jokes about it sometimes. Make jokes about getting killed or guys getting wounded, laugh about it.
Right.
It's not funny, but I guess it's just a way to cope with it. And I don't think you can go through that experience and not be affected by it in some way or another. Of course you are.
Now, actually the question I was going to ask first, describe a little bit, or as much as you want to actually, the camaraderie, the relationships that you developed with your group of guys, and like a typical day. If you can think of just a typical day, it probably would be mundane to you now, but maybe interesting to anybody who's watching this.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Well, first, the guys that I was with are, closer than family. I mean, these guys are my brothers. I was willing to die for them. They were willing to die for me. No questions asked. I still talk to them all the time. I know it's hard to describe how close we are, even to this day. But we always talk about Iraq. I mean, it's been, since 2006, well, 3 years ago. And it probably still crosses my mind every day. Every day I think about it. And so we talk about it a lot, and it's kind of hard. Like, we had such a sense of purpose there. And, sometimes we say we miss it, which probably sounds crazy to a lot of people. Not that...
Actually, not only interviews that I've done, but the ones I've watched, almost always all the veterans talk about how there's that piece of that experience that they do miss because it tapped into a certain part of their personality that, I don't know how to describe it, probably you would know what I'm talking about more than I would. But same thing, where it's almost like it gave them a sense of purpose for a significant period of time.
Yeah, it was, and that's exactly it. It's the sense of purpose that we had, the camaraderie, getting to spend that time with our friends every day. Obviously, not the horrors of it, but I don't think there's anything really in the civilian world that can equal that sense of purpose. Like, you're doing something really, really important, and not to glorify it. I'm not trying to glorify it, but I don't know how else to describe it. And even we, amongst ourselves, have a hard time describing, how we miss it, and sometimes we wish we were back there. I mean, I don't know if I'll do anything else other in my life again that I get that kind of gratification from. I mean, not the horrors. I'm not trying to glorify it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to replicate that with anything else that I do.
What did you guys do to keep yourselves entertained or to keep things light?
Oh, okay, yeah. So back to the day-to-day, day-to-day things. Well, a typical day. So this is kind of how we had our rotation duties set up. We did 3 days of FOB security, 3 days of AM operations, and 3 days of PM operations. So FOB security was kind of our downtime. We had, I don't know, like 7 posts, and we had 12 hours of post. 12 hours on. I think it was 12 hours off, and that was the time we could do our laundry. We could hang out. Smoked a lot while I was there, and we actually had TVs and VCRs. You could go to the MEC, which was 30 minutes outside of Fallujah, which is a major base where Fallujah Surgical was. Right. We had to take all our wounded, and they had all the colonels and all the important people were at Fallujah Surgical, or the MEC. You could buy bootleg DVDs and stuff. So we go there and buy those. And me and
outside the purvey of the FDA.
Yes,
there, huh?
we were. Hopefully, I probably shouldn't have said that, but anyway.
We've heard a lot worse, trust me.
Well, especially since I want to get a job in the government one day. But anyway.
I don't think that would be.
my roommate and I, so usually there's like 2 to 4 to 5 guys in a room, because the CMOC was an old, they told us, a government building, and that they had taken during Al-Fajr in 2004, and so it had 4 floors, so there's a platoon on second, third, and fourth floor, then the company commander and our chow hall and everything was down on the first floor. I had one roommate, and they stuck us down in this little corner room at the end of the hallway. We watched every season of King of Queens and smoked a lot of cigarettes. And so that's what we did. And it was just a lot of, I don't know, storytelling and,
Right.
you know, hanging out, waiting to go on the next patrol and trying to get some sleep. And then when we were doing AM or PM ops, depending on what the mission was for the day, either you were conducting a raid, you were doing a security patrol, you were doing a curfew enforcement patrol. Sometimes we get tasked out with doing zone clearings, or we would have to go, actually a couple times we did operations outside
Right.
the city of Fallujah, in areas where there were insurgent strongholds, and funneling a lot of weapons and money into Fallujah and other cities. So we conducted some operations out there. And in between that, we were either sleeping or hanging out watching movies.
King of Queens?
Yeah, King of Queens. Some guys actually got like their PlayStation shipped to
Right.
them. So we'd do a lot of Madden, play a lot of Madden. Our Tigers would golf.
Right. Okay. Well, it's good that you have the ability to do that.
Mhm.
How did you tolerate, I've heard, I've actually watched a couple of interviews of other folks that have been in Iraq, and they talked about the heat. How did you tolerate the heat with all of that equipment on you?
That was
Or didn't you?
that was tough. You actually kind of get used to it. You just get to the point where you kind of ignored it. But we're getting to the point where we almost have a ridiculous amount of gear. The war has got so politicized. I think they want to wrap us up in an entire bodysuit to try to get keep guys from getting. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. You know, you need to be able to shoot, move, and communicate, and you can barely do those things. You got so much body armor on, and we were there during the hottest times. You know, August, September. Those were really, really hot months. 120s, 125, and you kind of, yeah, you kind of try to plan your operations around that, because I mean, physically you can only go so many hours in the hottest part of the day with that much body armor on. But sometimes something happened, we had to go out, we had no choice. Also, the insurgents were a little bit more or less active during the hottest parts of the day, usually. And I just remember sometimes coming back from patrol, you know, we were out on foot for 4 hours in that kind of heat sometimes, and it would just look like I just jumped into a swimming pool.
Really?
Yeah, with all my gear on. That was never fun, but I despise cold weather, so I'd rather be hot than cold.
So living in Connecticut is perfect for you then?
Oh yeah, I love it here.
In terms of the amount of time that you were there, how long were you in Iraq, and were you there more than once? I know you said you had your initial
yeah.
tour where you were down, were you near Bahrain, or were you?
We were attached, we're at Bahrain, which was where the 5th Fleet is,
Okay.
I believe.
Right.
And we were attached to what is called CTF 53. We have a detachment of Marines that guard the MPS ship. So we were getting on ship and then taking them into Kuwait. And we had some of our guys in Iraq going up the Tigris and the Euphrates River. But the second time, we spent the entire 7-month rotation in Iraq in the city of Fallujah. And the way it works for reservists, they activate us. We got activated December 1st, 2005. We did a workup in New England at Fort Devens until January. January, we flew out to California to 29 Palms, continued our workup, and every Marine Corps unit that goes in country has to go through Mojave Viper, which is the Marine Corps' workup for Iraq. And so we did that, and then end of March, I think I actually stepped foot in Iraq like March 28th or March 29th, and then we were there until October 16th, I believe, and so we did our 7 months
Now,
there.
are you still in the reserves?
I'm still in the reserves
Still in
now.
the reserves. So is there always a chance you could be called?
No, we're getting activated again.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, we already know, and we already know it's Afghanistan.
Okay. So when is that going to be?
That is
May need to
always the
interview
question.
again.
They're saying it supposedly got pushed back
Right.
sometime, but
And
sometime,
we're probably not supposed to know.
yeah, sometime next year.
Okay. So after you had done your tour, you come back to the States.
Mhm.
What did you do once you were back?
Well, I'd already actually started my first semester in the fall of 2005 at Central, and they got activated, so I wasn't able to finish.
Right.
And so then I came back to school in the spring semester, would be '07, and started school here at Central.
Well, and I know you graduated because I was
Yes.
sitting next to you. So what have you been doing along with going to school? I know you said you've been working and
Hmm.
you spent the summer in Morocco. But what do you do for fun now?
Oh, what do I do for fun? Well, I'm still, I just work security at Stop and Shop. That's what I was doing while I was in school. It was a good job to pay the bills, and they work around my schedule. I am currently looking for a job right now. I'm hoping that I can get a better job with my bachelor's degree now while I'm in grad school. For fun, a lot of it is I love hanging out with Marines. Most of my time is spent with fellow Marines.
Right.
And I have dogs. I love my dogs. So actually, take a lot of walks in the woods with them. I actually did that this morning.
There's some good parks around
Mhm.
here to do that too.
So other than that, I'm learning Arabic, trying to become fluent in that. Like I said, I was wanting a job in the government.
Right.
So
And you're pursuing a master's now in international studies. I believe?
correct. Hmm. My area of concentration on the Middle East.
Right. Anything else you wanted to share about, just anything in general related to your
Yeah,
experiences?
there was one more thing that was standing out in my mind that I didn't get to say, and it goes back to something we were talking about earlier. And I always tell people I really get agitated when I hear people call and the insurgents are Al-Qaeda and Iraq freedom fighters.
Mhm.
I've heard that a lot. They are not. And there is absolute evil in war. And I think I witnessed some of the most evil, horrible people that have ever walked the earth. And the things that they did to their own people is inexcusable, no matter what your position on the war is, however you feel about the war. And I want to get this on the record too. It bothers me when I hear people say I support the troops, but I don't support the war. To me, that's an oxymoron. I would rather just people say, and I don't support you, and I don't support the war, which is fine, because you can't have it both ways, because actually, because the war has become so politicized, it has made our job so much more difficult. I don't even think the people know how strict our rules of engagement are, when we can shoot, when we can't shoot. I mean, it was so ridiculous, we couldn't go into any of the mosques, period, even though we knew that's where all the weapons were. I mean, we literally probably cleared almost every single building in the city of Fallujah and found a very minimal amount of weapons. And, we talked to the people, where are the weapons? Well, of course, they're in the mosque. If I was an enemy, I'd do the same thing. If there was a location I knew that my enemy wasn't going to go into, of course that's where I would hide them. And, I know Marines, a lot of them have gotten killed and wounded because we're fighting with one arm tied behind our back. And somehow they are a lot better at propaganda than we are, and our own people have turned against us and made it hard to fight the war. And I don't think most people know. There's so much bad press out there about the war. People, they don't have any idea what's really going on the ground every day. You hear the stories how, civilians got caught in the crossfire and got killed, or we dropped a bomb here, and civilians died. You don't hear about the mass murders of the civilian population by the insurgents. You don't hear the stories about the Marines who have been killed and wounded protecting civilians' lives. You know, I know, for example, one of our buddies, Lauber, who had, and there were 2 other Marines in the truck, in the Humvee, Giesler and Burns, who got wounded by a grenade that a kid threw into the turret. And, you know, Lauber could have fired upon him and killed the kid, would have killed a lot of other people, but he chose not to. You know, and Marines, there's all hundreds of those stories where Marines have put their lives on the line and have been wounded to save the civilian population and prevent more death and destruction. And people don't know that.
To switch gears a little bit, what was the reaction of your family when you enlisted, and how were you able to communicate easily and freely while you were deployed during that time?
My family, they were not happy with my decision to join the Marine Corps, and I think they were even less happy when I went to Iraq, because I had already done my 6-year enlistment.
Right.
I didn't have to go. I'd already been deployed. Because, again, the war was so politicized, DOD came up with a policy that if you had already been activated for a year, you didn't even have to go, even if you were still under contract. So I could have not gone because of that. I could have not gone because my enlistment was up, but I chose to go. So I think that they had a real hard time understanding why I was going, but I mean, in my mind, there was no question. Of course I was going. I don't think I would have ever been able to look at myself in the mirror had I not gone. You know, leaving my brothers behind, and it just didn't even cross my mind. Now they're proud of me, and now they're happy about it.
Was it, you know, I'm guessing, but maybe it must have been tough on your wife when you were over there, knowing what was going on a daily basis.
Yeah, it was hard. It got, let's see, I know, obviously, talking to her a lot about it now, like, the families were doing all right until, like, the first couple guys got wounded, and then after Detchen got killed, then I know it became really stressful on the family. I think that's another thing a lot of people don't know. It's not, you know, we're deploying, but the families are making a lot of sacrifices and going through a lot back home too. I mean, they don't know what's happening on a day-to-day basis. They only see what's going on in the news, and of course the news is always the most horrible things that happen. And then all of a sudden you get word, you know, somebody got hurt, somebody got killed, and you know, they're just living in constant. My wife, all the time, she said she was so afraid of the phone ringing, or you know, people knocking on the door, those kind of things.
Now, once you did come back, once you were back in college here at Central, I know the reaction to veterans returning is significantly different than it was during Vietnam. But can you talk a little bit about when you came back, what the reaction was, even when you're in classes and you hear people talking? I know I would actually witness one situation where you defended what the troops were doing in Iraq, and you did so very eloquently. But what has the reaction been from people that you run into that find out that you were over there?
I've never had like someone directly respond negatively toward me. It's always thank you for your service, or I support the troops, I don't support the war, but I already said how I feel about that.
I think that's what led to that conversation. Yeah,
but I've been very frustrated because there is a huge gap between what reality in Iraq and Afghanistan is and what people here on this campus think that they know about it, because again, media coverage just hasn't been accurate. And so they can't relate to me, and I'm sure I have a hard time relating to them and their thoughts and views of the war. But the most frustrating thing for me is when I just hear outright ignorant statements about the war. And I think part of it is just they just don't really take the time to read, you know, outside what they see on TV and go to other sources to really find out what's going on. And it's just, you know, emotional, and it's, you know, they're regurgitating a lot of times what they hear from other professors, or, you know, what they read on a liberal blog, and without, you know, firsthand knowledge. And then sometimes you share firsthand knowledge with them, and they dismiss it,
Mhm.
or they think that you're brainwashed. Or I've also found the response that people are dumbfounded that I support the war. They're like, well, how could you go to Iraq and still support the war? And then you try to explain it to them. And sometimes I've been impressed that people are like, oh wow, actually I didn't know that. I didn't know that was going on. And then they can change their mind, or they can agree with you on some things. But that's probably the most amazing thing to me, is that they assume, because I've actually been there, that I'm going to totally be against the war, and a lot of them can't understand why I support it, and still to this day support, why we went into Iraq and the invasion.
Do you find that that's a shared feeling amongst your comrades, your buddies, that same sense of frustration?
Oh, absolutely. I know one of my other friends, he goes to school here at Central, and we talk about that all the time, just that exact same thing. And it's very, very, very frustrating. I mean, a lot of these people, they're supposed to be the best and most educated in the country, but they really don't have any clue what's going on.
Right. Well, I think the point you made about how people tend to seek out sources of information that support their point of view,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. It's almost this sense where if I believe something, I have to support that belief, or
Mm-hmm.
it makes me question what I believe. So.
Also shocking is, you hear a lot of people that are, ashamed to be an American, ashamed of, our troops' actions in both wars. I know I'm not ashamed of anything that I did or my Marines did. In fact, I'm very proud of what all my Marines did. It's just, I don't know, it's very discouraging to hear that, especially, your friends died, friends got wounded, guys putting their lives on the line, and then people saying they're ashamed of it. It's very, very discouraging. I've in the summer language program that I spent the summer in Morocco, we had students that wouldn't even tell people they were American. They were saying they were French or whoever, Canadian. And this was a program paid by the State Department. We're supposed to be representing the State Department, our U.S. government, and people are ashamed to say they're American.
Well, in an effort to end on a more positive note, in terms of where you're hoping to go moving forward, I know you've mentioned that you're going to be deployed again, but what are your goals or aspirations professionally?
Mm-hmm.
Given all the experience that you've had, probably significantly more than anybody would have in 2 or 3 lifetimes, what are you hoping to do with everything that you've learned and are learning now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to continue studying Arabic until I become fluent in Arabic. Then I'm wanting to get a job within the State Department. Obviously, one of the biggest problems I think we have within our government and building policy toward the Middle East and our relationships with the Middle East and the Arab world is we just have a lot of people that don't speak the language. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to understand the culture and overcome stereotypes that we have and that they have toward us when there's that language gap, because there's just things that can't be translated from English to Arabic and Arabic to English. I mean, it's really true, a lot of things do get lost in translation. And some of the people that are the so-called experts, I don't think are really experts. How can you be an expert if you don't speak the language? Because then you're not going to really know the culture, you're not going to really understand the people. So that's why I want to become fluent in Arabic, hopefully work for the State Department and help bridge that gap so we can make better policy toward the Arab world and build better relationships in the future, because I support the war to this day, and if I had to do it all over again, I absolutely would without hesitation. But it's also something that, war is not not necessarily a good thing. It's not fun. So if it can be avoided, it should be avoided, but sometimes it can't be. And so I would like to help in the future avoid those kind of problems that we've had with the Arab world.
All right, well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and certainly best of luck to you, and thank you again.
Thank you.